Hello everybody, Jag Week begins today on the channel with this, a 2009 XKR. Now I'm very glad that its owner James has decided to bring this car to me, because I've been hunting one down for the channel for quite some time. Now I've actually driven a couple of XKs in the past in my pre-YouTube days. In fact, one of the cars that I was benchmarking against my Lotus Evora 400 when I bought that car was the XKR S in that particularly stunning shade I think they call Riviera Blue. Now at the time, I decided that I didn't want the XKR S because although it in theory offered great value for money, it felt like a car that didn't know how to handle the power that it had. It didn't communicate to me in the same way that the Lotus did. It had a dim-witted, old-fashioned automatic gearbox, and it just felt like a bit of an oppressive place and wasn't very light and airy. However, in the intervening years, I keep looking at the XKR and going, that is an awful lot of car for the money. Underneath the skin, this car had a brand spanking new aluminium chassis, which replaced the ancient XJS platform which the previous XK was based on. In fact, this chassis is still in use today in the F-Type, which uses a shortened version. This car, unlike the F-Type, is a 2+2, although good luck getting anyone back there. However, the key ingredients for a Jag are all present and correct. You have a beautiful and glorious 5-litre supercharged V8 up the front, producing here around about 500 horsepower. It is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same lump that is still in use today, and is a derivative of the lump that was used, well, many years before this came out. The 5-litre was introduced in 2009, the cars before that using a 4.2-litre version with a little less power. The most obvious and direct rival for an XKR would be an Aston Martin V8 Vantage. On paper, the Jag gives the Aston a thorough drubbing. You get a hell of a lot more power for an awful lot less money. And I actually think that the XK is a car that has really grown into its looks. If you asked me years ago, and indeed even today, whether I prefer one of these or an F-Type, based solely on looks, I would say the old XK. It's just a little bit longer, and the whole thing, to me, just works that little bit better. I know that styling is a very personal thing, and clearly an awful lot of people like the F-Type, but I've always had a real soft spot for the XK. They did do a few different versions with a few different revisions and facelifts and things, but overall, they're pretty cool looking things. The only thing I don't really like about this one is the wheels, but of course they do come off and can easily be changed. In here it does feel, like a Jag, or certainly like a Jag should. You have 1 million way adjustable electric seats, which are actually very comfortable. Not the most supportive, but then this car, in comparison to the F-Type, is certainly more overtly Grand Tourer than sports car. That also means its rather prodigious curb weight is somewhat more forgivable. And for those interested in numbers, I'm going to pop the specs on the screen for you now. You've got plenty of leather in here, and with this generation of XK, Jag decided they wanted to drop the sort of old man image that they felt they were being lumbered with, and so you will not find any wood in here. It's all sort of glossy piano black and aluminium, and actually it feels pretty nice. It's only really the infotainment system which badly dates the car, and honestly, even in 2009, I'm not sure it was a particularly cutting-edge system. The sat-nav does work, as long as you sort of ignore its attempts at traffic guidance, because, well, it's just ancient and medieval in many ways, but the car functions. One real pleasant surprise is the fact that you can actually see that nice long bonnet out the front. Now, it's still a reasonably difficult car to place because there is so much of it out there, but at least you have some idea of what's going on. If you were to get into an Aston Martin Vantage of the same era, it's a much more daunting car because you feel so much lower down in the car and you can't see any of the front at all, at least not where I sit. got a very nice headlining up here, sort of black Alcantara or suede type thing, and it does feel like a pretty nice place to be. You have a Bowers & Wilkins stereo system in here, unlike the later Meridian units, which I really don't like. It sounds okay, it's not spectacular, but it looks nice, which I guess is enough for some people. Fuel economy is predictably alright. I mean, the car will get sort of mid-20s. And this car has one modification, and perhaps the most obvious one. It's the exhaust. It has a different centre section, so it's now running an X-pipe in the middle, designed to give it a little bit more volume. Now, its owner has admitted to a little bit of buyer's remorse in terms of the exhaust, because he says that since fitting it, the MPG does seem to have taken a considerable dip. I'm currently driving the car in dynamic mode, because I may as well, but everything is in full auto. Even so, just driving gently, you can feel the fact that the car is a little bit traction limited. And that was always my concern with one of these, particularly the XKRS, which has the 550 horsepower version of the same engine. I used to think that the XK had an open differential. In fact, it has an electronically controlled mechanical limited slip diff system, which Jaguar call active differential control. It is designed to be open by default and then activated using a clutch pack. Sadly for me, the system seemed a little bit unpredictable and felt too much like an open diff too much of the time, meaning that I never really had the confidence to explore the car's limits in trickier conditions like this. It's certainly comfortable enough to use as a daily driver, and unlike the F-Type that replaced it, it actually has reasonable boot space. This was available in both coupe and convertible form. For me, it's got to be a coupe. Those iconic looks are just lost a little bit with the convertible, really. That supercharged engine gives you hefty shove from basically no RPM, and it'll top out just over 6.5. Now, people often talk about higher revving engines as being automatically better, but I just don't think that's the case. I used to think that, but nowadays what interests me more is how much usable power you have. Stuff like Honda VTEC engines, yeah, they're great and they're fun, and I love them, and I love my S2000, but the fact is it's got about 3,000 RPM worth of usable power. This has got about 5,000 RPM worth, and that is rather nice to have. The car's actually very well damped, but you can really feel how lively that back end wants to be. It's kind of comical, really. The steering is actually much better than I remember it being. Perhaps it was because I was benchmarking the car against a Lotus at the time that I was unnecessarily harsh on it, and it's certainly not the most feelsome and doesn't weight up like I'd like it to, but it's not devoid of feel. The seat actually hugs you a little bit more than you think that it might, but it's that tail end that I'm just concerned about at the minute, and that's the thing that's kind of impeding progress. That being said, the car flies down this road very well, and the damping is just what I'd expect from a Jag. It's firm enough to get the job done, but also pliant and supple enough to not beat me about in the process. The brakes in the car actually work fairly well. They're reasonably easy to modulate. A little bit over servo, but that does seem to be a bit of a theme with Jags. However, it certainly doesn't stop you enjoying the car. The Aston, at least as far as I remembered it, was always the car that drove that little bit better, talked to you more, was more enjoyable, more fun, felt like a more special place to be. And I think that is still the case. The Aston interior is a little bit better, although equally out of date in many ways. Now, the engine in the Aston is arguably more special, but we all know that it is a close relation of this, and you cannot deny the fact that Jaguar are just giving you a lot more go for your money. In looks terms, I think the Aston does also have it, and if you're a driver, the Aston has got miles more feel. I mean, it completely drubs the Jaguar in those terms, and it has a brilliant manual gearbox, whereas the Jag has no manual option, which I thought was always a bit of a shame. However, As a long-distance cruiser, as a GT car, the Jaguar starts to win back some ground. It's got more usable space in the back. I think it is an even more comfortable car than the V8 Vantage, although that is truthfully marginal. It's been over a month since I drove a Vantage, so I wouldn't choose between them based solely on that. If you don't want a manual and you want to choose between the two auto boxes, the Jag is far better. The Jag used a traditional torque converter, whereas Aston used a horrible sequential manual box, and it's just nasty. There's nothing good that I have to say about the Aston Sport Shift gearbox at all. Sorry, Aston fans. It's that sort of pulling away at low speeds where you just feel that rear end fighting for traction, and it just doesn't instill you with confidence. However, the car is clearly more than capable of making decent progress without having to use all the rev range or being that aggressive with it, and that does make it rather more enjoyable. In fact, although it might sound like the Aston is my preferred car, and if you put a gun against my head, it is, the Jaguar actually fares a lot better than I remember. This is still fast. This is a really, really fast car. And when you look at the prices these are available for, they're incredible value for money. £30,000 is kind of what it takes to get you into really any half-tidy V8 Vantage. You can knock 10 grand off of that and walk away with a very nice XKR that is going to be newer, lower miles, and with a specification that's just as good, and a lot more go in it. Plus, although Aston Martin is of course the superior brand, one of the things I've learned from this week of gorgeous Jaguars, there's nothing wrong with a Jag either. It's a brand that people have an awful lot of love for, and I'm now happy enough to count myself among those. It is a damn good car, and I don't know why, but they just seem to be really criminally overlooked, and they just don't deserve it. Are they perfect? No. Are they bad? Absolutely not. And I can have fun in it. That I didn't expect. I really, really thought that this road would break this car, and it doesn't. Score one for the Jag. Thank you all for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you for the next installment of Jag Week. Bye bye.